unjustifiably in a position that I'd rather not be in.
It's the spring of 1998. WCW is still doing pretty well for itself at this point in the Monday Night War, even after they had to overcome the debacle of the Starrcade 97 main event. There is friction and there is dissension in the upper ranks of the New World Order. The formation of the Wolfpac is very much in the near future. And oh yeah, Sting is the babyface world champion if anybody cares about that. Time to look at Spring Stampede 1998, or as my editor misheard me recently on the phone, Spring Stampede 1998. This show took place on April 19th at the Denver Coliseum in Denver, Colorado. Nominated by the Mad Metalhead and Didymus over at patreon.com/wrestlingwithwregret. The main storyline at this point in WCW is that power struggle in the nWo. You have Kevin Nash, Hollywood Hogan, and Randy Savage all fighting for control of the group, as well as fighting over who's going to be the next guy to take the world title off of Sting, potentially. Also, it's the middle of April, and how have we gone this far in the year without using Bret Hart worth a damn at this point, outside of a few interview sound bites?
If I see somebody getting screwed over, that's my call. Get rid of Hogan, get rid of Nash, and get rid of the nWo. Whether I win or lose isn't important so much, it's just getting a fair shot.
Frustrated isn't the goddamn word for it!
7,428 folks in attendance for what Tony Schiavone calls the springtime tradition. Yes, that big tradition that began in 1994, then didn't happen again until 97. The show also picked up about 275,000 buys. It's up about 65K from last year's Stampede, but down considerably from the previous several months of pay-per-views. Schiavone, Mike Tenay, and Bobby Heenan are on commentary here. Look at that beautiful set. The big barn, the taxidermied bull, the stagecoach, everyone coming into the sliding barn doors. Why didn't they make this set on Revenge? The first match on the card sees a member of Raven's flock, though not for much longer, in Saturn taking on Goldberg. Yes, at this point, Goldberg has dropped Bill from his name. He is at a whopping 73-0 in his streak, and he is super over at this point. He is clearly one of the most popular names in WCW at this time, certainly on a different level of popularity from, say, the Cruiserweights or what's going on in the nWo. At this point, Goldberg is still very much a hot commodity, and considering how he's booked, it's very easy to see why. We do know that the next night on Nitro, he will be wrestling for the US Championship, either Diamond Dallas Page or Raven, depending on who wins that matchup tonight. The match begins. Goldberg starts off by blocking an abdominal stretch, just hucking Saturn all over the place. Kidman tries to interfere and Goldberg just throws him at Saturn. Saturn comes back with a leg trip and a nice springboard leg drop. Saturn lays in the attacks for a while, but Goldberg reversing a suplex. Nice dropkick into Goldberg, who flies into the steps, and a head scissors off the apron. There is a scary slip off the ropes though to the outside, but they recover and keep going nicely. There's a bit of a miscommunication off the ropes, so they just do the spot again, and Goldberg kicks Saturn in the dome. The spear, the jackhammer is attempted, but Kidman once again tries to get involved. We get a low blow. Saturn trying a superplex, but Goldberg press slams him off the top. The flock keeps trying to run in. Kidman eats a spear. Saturn gets the rings locked in on Goldberg, but he fights out into a badass looking jackhammer. The win for Goldberg, and he is now 74-0. I give it 2 stars out of 5. This is a very glorified squash match where you know pretty well what's going to happen before the bell even rings, but this was still a very entertaining match. I think Saturn, just flying all over the place, bumping his ass off for Goldberg, and Kidman as well for that matter, was a great visual, made Goldberg look $1 million. It did get rickety by the end of things when there seemed to be some blown spots, some forgotten moments, and who knows what the cause of that is, but I think this match is a good reminder as to why Goldberg's best matches were under the 5-minute mark. This one went about 8 minutes. So, cut a little bit of time out of that, and I think you would have had a stronger, more entertaining squash. But yeah, I had fun watching this. Up next, some Cruiserweight action as Chavo Guerrero Jr., accompanied by his uncle Eddie Guerrero, takes on a man whose match I just called recently at WrestleMania weekend in Ultimo Dragon. Last month, Eddie beat his nephew in an impromptu matchup, and as a condition of winning that match, basically has control over Chavo's entire life. It's like when the older sibling tells the younger sibling, well, you're going to be my slave for a whole month. That's basically what happens here with the Eddie-Chavo dynamic. Eddie is forcing Chavo into matches. He doesn't want to wrestle, wrestling Eddie's matches for him, just trying to break him really mentally here, costing him matches and so forth. Then back on the Thunder before this show, Eddie offered Chavo his freedom if he can beat Ultimo tonight, but if he doesn't win, Eddie will come down on him twice as hard. A fan in the aisle throwing glitter on Eddie and Chavo, throw that person out for that shit. Side note, just saying, regardless of politics, I would gladly vote for a presidential candidate who promised a federal ban on glitter. Fast action to start things off with these two. Ultimo Dragon doing a headstand on the turnbuckle, hits the quick kicks. Both guys are trading submissions and holds for a while. Dragon tying up Chavo on a variety of holds as Eddie cannot hide his disappointment. More fun back and forth. They're fighting on the top rope for a bit, teasing something big. On the apron, Dragon suplexing Chavo to the outside. Athai means dragon! Chavo responds with a plancha to the outside. Ultimo with a cross-body attempt, but Chavo drop-kicking him in the air, perhaps a low blow. Referee trying to keep him separated as Eddie is livid that Chavo is not capitalizing and trying to cheat to win. He slaps Chavo in the face even. Chavo stays on the attack, goes for his tornado DDT, but it's countered into the lethal Dragon Sleeper, and Ultimo wins. I give it 4 stars out of 5. Such a good match on this show. It's one of my favorites of the evening. I think this is some great cruiserweight action, a really high-end display of what the division has to offer at this time in WCW, and I think Chavo and Dragon have great chemistry together, especially considering Chavo's not very deep into his time in the business yet. Also, I love the story they're telling here with Chavo and Eddie. That really helps build up their conflict and really helped elevate the finish in particular of this match. We go to the WCW web zone where Diamond Dallas Page is being interviewed by Lee Marshall. On we go to our next match for the World TV title. No time limit as Booker T defends against Chris Benoit. For weeks now on Nitro, Booker and Chris have been wrestling for the TV Championship in some great matches that have all gone to time limit draws, which has led to this big match with no time limit. There will indeed be a winner here. Fierce locking up to start things off. These guys not wasting any time with takedowns. Benoit tries to focus on the legs, but Booker is still pretty powerful early on. It's a very evenly matched contest, no clear advantage between either guy for a while until Booker's knocked off the apron and onto the floor. Benoit begins to take over. He hits the flying headbutt. We get a cover and a rope break. We're just past the 10-minute mark of the match now. Benoit starts hitting those rolling Germans, a huge back suplex off the top rope, and we get a double down. Booker gets some hope though with a big spine buster. He comes back, everyone's raising the roof. Booker goes to the axe kick, but Benoit pulls Mickey J into the way. The referee is down. The crippler crossface is applied. Booker might have tapped before grabbing the ropes. Benoit goes to pick up the referee, but Booker hits the side kick over Mickey J to hit Benoit. The cover, the win, Booker retains. This one gets 3.5 stars out of 5 for me. I really enjoyed this match. These two just beat the hell out of each other with a great level of intensity. And what I like about this match and this time period especially is just this is the feud that really helped cement Booker T's status as like a future top star. Like this is the feud here, I'd say, this and the Best of 7 series that is soon to follow with these two, that really cements Booker as like, okay, he's a single star now. Like he and Stevie Ray, fun tag team, but Booker T is the future. There was a little bit of controversy tacked on to the end of this one, far from the end of their rivalry, but it leaves you wanting more, and so that's why I like the match. A hard left into Snoozeville up next as Curt Hennig with Rick Rude takes on the British Bulldog with Jimmy Jam Neidhart. This one's kind of a sub-rivalry of sorts within the WCW nWo overarching feud, as you just kind of individual members of each team kind of going after each other without necessarily the support of other people in the respective squads. They talk a lot about the history of Hennig and Rude as friends over the last 25 years in wrestling. This is also one of the few times right now in WCW programming that I can see where Bret Hart is actually kind of a factor and kind of being utilized here. We've seen him trying to help out his brothers-in-law during the build. Actually, my favorite Bret and WCW moment thus far comes in the build to this. It's kind of a throwaway bit, but there's this segment near the end of a Nitro where Bret is kind of like fighting off all the members of the nWo, it seems. Bret hits Hennig with an inverted atomic drop, and Curt just sells it like, yikes, ouch, I'm going to scoot on out of here. In fact, things are so acrimonious between the two two sides going into this show, and there was a bit of use of handcuffs in the build to this. There's a last-minute stipulation added to this thing that Jim Neidhart and Rick Rude need to be handcuffed to each other at ringside. Where have we just seen this like 2 weeks earlier? Bulldog with an early jump on Hennig begins to attack his injured leg. Curt comes back with some chops. Rude is flailing to get in, but Neidhart, who's all about that sweatpants life, pulls him back out. Bulldog ramming Hennig into the turnbuckle pads, working their way down. He goes for a sharpshooter, but suddenly Jim Neidhart is seemingly straight up assaulting a police officer while Rude somehow gets free from the handcuffs. Rude helping out Hennig, and that allows him to win. We soon realize the cop is actually Vincent in disguise, who's now helping his fellow nWo buddies. When do they swap out the two black cops in this scene? Hennig and Rude beat the hell out of the Bulldog. Rude chokes him and Neidhart with a nightstick, and that's pretty much how this segment ends. I give it a half star out of 5. It was a bad match with a worse finish, though I will say I laughed my ass off when we saw Virgil in the cop uniform, the big switcheroo they did at the end of the match. But if we're going to compare this to its current contemporary in Triple H, Owen Hart at WrestleMania 14 with Slaughter and Chyna handcuffed at ringside, I would say that Triple H and Owen was a vastly superior match. Just the physicality in this one was not great, and I did not like it. Also, can I just say that Hennig and Rude are probably my candidates for two of the least relevant or like necessary nWo members. Like those two, Dusty Rhodes and Ted DiBiase, I'm like, why are you in this team? None of you fit the vibe of the nWo at all. Well, them and like Michael Wall Street probably. Cruiserweight Championship match up next as Lionheart Chris Jericho defends against Prince Iaukea. Yes, the future artist formerly known as Prince Iaukea is a young up-and-comer at this point and is the latest challenger to Chris Jericho as the Cruiserweight Champion. He's been on a big roll as of late, recently embracing his heel side. He's got a lot of trophies, both metaphorical and physical, at his disposal here. He's got Rey Mysterio's knee, Juventude's mask, and most recently, Dean Malenko's pride and dignity. Jericho beat Dean in a match at Uncensored the previous month. It was Dean's 4th pay-per-view loss in a row. He said it was time to go home, and he's been gone ever since, so Jericho naturally continues to pour it on as the weeks continue, including his now famous list of 1,004 holds. Armbar! I've said it before and I'll say it again. It was this character, when I first started watching wrestling, this era of Chris Jericho was one of the things that got me so hooked into WCW, wrestling in general. I mean, this character to me was one of the best. Jericho with a shoelace wrapped around his head. He quotes Cheap Trick on his way to the ring and wants to give a shout out to Malenko, who he says is currently in the Where Are They Now file. As the match begins and Iaukea gets a start on Jericho, Mike Tenay contradicting a statement that Heenan said at the beginning of the match, because Bobby said, oh, I talked to Dean Malenko recently and he said that Jericho's the best, and Tenay was like, well, Malenko hasn't been around ever since Uncensored, so there's no way you talked to him. And Heenan goes, oh, well, he looked like Dean Malenko when I saw him, he had a tattered t-shirt and torn up shoes and everything. Like, I thought that was hilarious. Iaukea with a big dive to Jericho, keeping the pressure applied, but Jericho hits him with a drop toe hold into the ropes and takes over. He goes for a big old flying nothing, but Iaukea sees it coming and makes a big comeback. Jericho countering a victory roll attempt with a lion tamer. There's a rope break. They both go up top and they both crash and burn. Back in the ring, another roll up is blocked. Another lion tamer attempt is countered. Northern Lights and a rope break. Prince with a twisting super sunset flip attempt, but Jericho getting him in the hold after a third attempt. Iaukea taps and Jericho retains. He grabs Iakea's entrance sarong and takes it as yet another trophy to add to his collection. This one gets 3.5 stars out of 5 for me. Another solid cruiserweight / mid-card match here at a WCW pay-per-view. That's kind of what we come to expect in this era of the company. The cruiserweight matches on this show, and there is one still to come, they are all very entertaining in their own way, but they all tell very distinctly different stories. And what I like about Jericho at this point is he is definitely a sniveling, coward heel on the microphone, but he's not quite that way in the ring yet. He's still very capable. He's not like a total incompetent, or he's not chicken shit. He's just like still very business in the ring. And that's always been one of my favorite combinations. If you can be entertaining and hilarious on the mic, but still be like treated seriously as a competitor, I think that's the perfect combination. Back in the web zone, Lee Marshall reminding Raven that that's not his actual US title at the moment, and Raven says revenge is a dish best served cold. Up we go now to a grudge tag team match as Buff Bagwell and Scott Steiner take on Rick Steiner and Lex Luger. Back at Super Brawl, Scott turned on his brother Rick and joined up with the nWo, completely changed his look, and Big Papa Pump was born. He began hanging out with Buff Bagwell a lot, and this match has been made so Rick can finally get his hands on his little brother, but Bagwell and Scott, of course, have been protesting from the very beginning. Buff shows up with a badly made cast on his hand. They say the match has to be canceled because Buff is hurt. Buff is using an earlier edict that was established by James J. Dillon, who's the chairman of the executive committee, saying, hey, Randy Savage needs a doctor's note to compete tonight, so therefore I need a doctor's note and I don't have clearance, so I guess we can't wrestle. But J.J. Dillon brings in an orthopedic surgeon flown in from Atlanta to make the call, so he's checking on it. As he's doing that though, Buff grabbing Dillon by the shirt with his supposedly injured hand, and the match is on. Bagwell with an early jump on Rick, but the dog-faced gremlin with a great-looking slam. Scott jumping his brother again, Buff on top. Scott and Buff trade quick tags, working over Rick for several minutes until Rick hits a quick slam to Buff. Rick makes a desperate tag to Luger, who finally gets into this match, goes for the torture rack but is cut off. A double team move is thwarted. Scott and Rick finally alone. Scott skedaddles, they both run to the back. Bagwell goes for the blockbuster, but Rick comes back and shoves him down. The rack on the stuff. Bagwell submits and Luger and Rick win. I'm going to give it 1.5 stars out of 5. It was a fairly quick and academic tag team match here. It was kind of helping basically be a lateral move toward the next step in the Scott and Rick rivalry, because Rick takes all the heat, doesn't really get to show his strength against Scott here. Luger comes in and dominates, and that's pretty much all she wrote. So we're going to get that Rick and Scott confrontation somewhere else down the road. Mean Gene plugging the hotline on stage. Then we go to a bonus unadvertised match as Psychosis takes on La Parka. La Parka doing a little dance to start things off. Chops Psychosis so hard in the chest it makes him spit a lot. Psychosis comes back, big head scissors, and he dives to the outside. La Parka on the apron hits a unique body scissor to pull Psy out of the ring, follows up with a springboard moonsault. La Parka knocks Psychosis off the ropes, does a dance again, gets crotch on the top rope. Psychosis hits a twisting plancha off the top to the floor. A very cool spot here where Psychosis gets the legs up in the corner but gets caught and slammed. La Parka keeps pinning but pulling his opponent up at the last minute. La Parka caught in the ropes and takes a big guillotine leg drop though for the win. I give it 2.5 stars out of 5. It was a pretty decent match, some fun high flying in this one, and there was a little bit of depth added to this thing thanks in part to the commentary, because I was watching the build to this show and I kind of forgot why La Parka and Psychosis are fighting until commentary reminded me. It is just kind of hard for me to get into these bonus matches sometimes because it's just not part, it just feels like it kind of goes against the flow of everything else the show has been presenting. The commentary team kills some time as they set up a pole in the ring for bat match. It's time for the tag team bat on a pole match as Hollywood Hogan and Kevin Nash take on the Giant and Rowdy Roddy Piper. A few weeks ago on Nitro, Commissioner Roddy Piper said he was putting a stop to all the bat attacks in WCW. No more bats, except for this bat match we're going to have at this pay-per-view and all these other times bats have continued to be used in the build. It is trouble in paradise for two of the founding members of the New World Order. Like I said at the top of this review, Hogan and Nash are in a bit of a power struggle in the organization, and of course they're still dealing with Savage and all of his madness, so to speak. So the point of this match is the first person to grab the bat from the pole will be able to use it in the match, and oh my god, look at how high up this bat is. Who's gonna grab this thing? Great line by Hogan at the entrance, "I'm a man!" And good lord, what is that on the Giant's arm? Is that a burn or a bug bite that was horribly infected? Piper goes to the bat right away, and the pole looks as if it's gonna snap in two when he climbs it. Hogan and Nash put a stop to him for a moment. Hogan gets knocked around by Piper and Giant. Hogan grabs his weight belt and gets to the strapations, brother. Hogan is vulnerable as the Giant shows up and whips Hogan, then spanks him. Hogan gives Piper a low blow. Both he and Hogan are down. Nash is tagged in. He tells Piper he wants the big man. Nash and Giant clash like a couple of titans. The nWo with some cheap shots behind the referee's back, but if we're allowing belt shots, then why are we having a referee enforce tags? We get a double boot from the big men and they both go down. Piper and Hogan are tagged in. They trade blows. Piper mule kicking Nash, and the referee's got to pretend like he didn't just see it because there are rules in this thing apparently. Giant with a damn drop kick to Nash. With some help from the Giant, Piper grabs the bat. Hogan takes it from Piper and then throws it away. In comes the Disciple, aka Ed Leslie, with his best look he ever had in his career, carrying his own bat. He hands it to Hogan, hits the Giant with it with the referee distracted. Hogan goes to hit Piper's bad hip, but he hits Nash instead. Piper beating the hell hell out of Hogan and Nash with the bat. Hogan begs off, Disciple distracts, Hogan hits Piper once more and pins to win. After the bell, Nash upset with Hollywood, but Hogan wants to make it up for him by letting him powerbomb the Giant, but it was a setup as he decks Nash instead. Giant wakes back up and breaks the bat over his knee like so as Hogan powders. This one gets 1 star out of 5 for me. It would be my choice for the worst match of the night were it not for Bulldog versus Hennig, but I think this is such a bigger match considering the star power. And so, yeah, it was a hard one to get through. And I wish they could stay consistent on the enforcement of rules, what's allowed in a match, what isn't, because it has literally never made any sense to me, regardless of like what era of WCW I'm watching here. And it also makes the next 2 matches feel a little bit weird in hindsight, seeing how this one went down. But yeah, the whole bat switcheroo was stupid. Apparently it was because one bat was rubber, one was made of wood, so Giant could break the bat over his knee, so you had to have the wooden one, but the rubber one was for the hitting. It was, bat matches, pole matches, what are you going to do? In the semi-main event for the U.S. Championship, Diamond Dallas Page defends against the man who stole the physical belt from him in Raven. Raven, for a lot of weeks on promos, has blamed Page for derailing his career back in the old days of WCW. He says he was exiled to Chainsaw Island for 3 years, which, by the way, is the most awesome copyright-friendly euphemism from ECW I've ever heard. The Flock still sitting at ringside, as they often did. Sick Boy grabs Page, but the double team backfires as the match begins. Raven getting knocked out of the ring, DDP not far behind, each man trying their own finisher, but the other man is able to escape. In this Ravens Rules match, we go up the ramp, they make their way to the stagecoach, Page climbs up top, diving off into Raven, weapons, wagon wheels, fences, a suplex into the web zone. Up in the stands, Raven dropping down onto Page on a table, but it does not break. Raven grabbing a trash can, Tony's like, oh my god, this could end it here, and I'm like, this could end it? Finally back into the ring, Sick Boy has a kitchen sink and hands it to Raven. He chokes with the bull rope, but Page fights back and a drop toe hold into the sink. The old Drano maneuver, says Shivani. Kidman and Sick Boy interfere again. There's a kick out. In comes Terrible Van Hammer, who also accidentally hits his own leader. Low blow on Page, and here comes the Yeti, who slams Page and he still kicks out. Lodi tosses in a stop sign, but Page grabs it and uses it for his own. Diamond Cutter onto Kidman, but in comes yet another guy who decks Page. Even flow by Raven. He wins and is now officially the new U.S. champion. Who's that bald guy? It's Horace Boulder, aka Horace Hogan. That's right, Hulk Hogan's nephew officially debuts for WCW here as the newest member of the Flock. I give it 4 stars out of 5. This is my pick for match of the night. It's really tied up there with Chavo and Ultimo, but I think this one is better one for me just based on the story. It was a very entertaining semi-main event matchup and just another example of what kind of breakout year DDP had been having since early 97. This is another example of that. And I think it was a fun brawl on the outside as well. The story of DDP fighting all the different Flock members and ultimately coming up short in the end was very well done, made him look really strong. Of course, as far as Raven goes in his U.S. title reign, it did not last very long because the very next night on Nitro, remember what I said about Goldberg? He challenged Raven for the belt that Monday and promptly beat him for it. And in our main event, a match for the WCW Championship, which was made also into a no DQ match earlier in the evening, as Sting defends the nWo's Randy Savage. With Hollywood Hogan having failed to reclaim the world title from Sting, it was now Randy's turn, but of course Hogan has no time for that mess. These two fought in the main event of Uncensored the previous month, a steel cage match that went to a no contest and resolved absolutely nothing. In the build to this match, Savage is run down by a red and yellow Viper outside the building, and strangely it was never officially revealed who did it, but we all kind of knew. Savage suffering multiple injuries, but is still going to push through after removing his cast and getting a doctor's clearance to compete. By the way, it's worth pointing out, Sting is the champion here. Of course, he beat Hogan at Starrcade 97, beat him for reals in the rematch at Super Brawl, but like so many other babyface champions in history, he is kind of the least important part of this storyline. Savage is off to a hot start, tries to use his right hand, but his arm is still hurt. Action spills up to the stage area, into the fence, onto the wagon wheel. Didn't we all just see stuff like this a moment ago? Hey, there's some hay. Sting goes for a splash on the barricade and Savage gets out of the way. More back and forth of these two. Sting suplexing Savage on the floor. Randy with a low blow, back on the offensive. He goes for a flying nothing, but Sting cuts him off. Sting almost smooshes Charles Robinson, but he stops, but then smooshes him anyway. Sting stings up from the pile driver as Elizabeth brings a chair into the ring. An awful chair shot by her, but it ends up with her getting beat up. Oh my god. God. In comes Hogan, who shoves Savage off the top rope. Now it's worth pointing out, at Halloween Havoc 97, that famous moment near the end of the show where Savage leaps from the top of a massive steel cage and lands feet first in the ring, that alone did a lot of damage to his ACL, and judging by the way he holds his leg after falling off the top rope here, it's safe to say that ligament is now gone. He still pushes through, takes a scorpion death drop. In comes Kevin Nash, who attacks Sting. The recently unbanned but now rebanned powerbomb comes into play, and he jackknife Sting, puts Savage on top. The 3 count, the pin, and Savage wins his 3rd WCW Championship. Garbage being thrown into the ring, which at this point is a weekly occurrence on this show, as Nash helps the Macho Man celebrate. I give it 3 stars out of 5. It's a good match, but good is about as high as I can really rate it. I think that the extra madness at the end, no pun intended, made things a bit more wild and exciting, but there was a lot of the no DQ elements that we had already seen in just the previous match that made this one feel kind of redundant. I will say, I don't think I've ever recalled a spot where Elizabeth got beat up so much like she did in this one moment near the end. Kind of shocking. As for Savage, though, the good times as champion would not last. Because of that knee injury, he'd have to drop the belt to Hollywood Hogan the very next night on Nitro with some help from Bret the Hitman Hart. My grade for WCW Spring Stampede 1998 is a B-. You know, pole match aside, Davey Boy and Curt Hennig match aside, this is a pretty darn strong show. I think even though some of the character development, some of the booking itself might be a little rickety, I think the match quality, especially from the mid-card, is absolutely great. Definitely check out DDP and Raven, check out Chavo and Ultimo Dragon, check out Benoit and Booker T. I mean, there's a lot of gold in this show, even if some of the upper echelon stuff, the upper tier stuff on this show is a bit lacking. I think you can still get a lot of enjoyment out of this show. Well, I hope you enjoyed this review of Stampede 98. Let me know what you thought about the show in the comment section below. Give the video a thumbs up if you like it, and subscribe to Wrestling with Wregret. Click that bell icon to get all the notifications when I drop new content. Well, in 2 weeks, folks, we go back to the year 2000 in that glorious time in WCW. We have just finished Uncensored 2000. Hulk Hogan won the Yappa Pie strap match. Sid Vicious retained the WCW Championship. But of course, all that means very little because we're about to enter the great championship reset brought about by Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff. And this next show takes us to the next chapter in that story. It's Spring Stampede 2000. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.